This is part 3 of the lecture on the overview of special education. My name is Dr. George Giuliani from Hofstra University, and we're continuing on now talking about prevalence. And in special education, prevalence refers to the total number of individuals with a particular disability currently existing in the population at a given time. So when you think about prevalence, you're thinking about total numbers of individuals with a particular disability. Now, in special education, prevalence is often expressed not just in total numbers, but also in percentages. And according to the U.S. Department of Education's latest data on the prevalence of students in special education, there are approximately 6.5 million U.S. students between the ages of 3 and 21 years of age receiving special education services. Now, when we talk about prevalence in terms of the classifications under IDEA, one of the things to look at is what we call the Big Five. And the Big Five refers to the fact that of the 13 different classifications in special education, 5 of them make up 83% of the children with disabilities receiving special education. And if you look at them, you will see that those Big Five are the following: learning disabilities at 36%, speech and language impairments at 21%, other health impairments at 12%, autism at 7%, and intellectual disabilities at 7%. Now, a few things to make note of. First of, learning disabilities is the highest one at 36%. This does not mean that 36% of all children have learning disabilities, okay? Let me be very clear about that. What it means is that 36% of all children receiving special education have the classification on their IEPs of learning disabilities. This is followed by speech and language impairments, other health impairments, autism, and intellectual disabilities. 2 things to note there. First, you might wonder, well, I wonder why OHI is so high at 12%. And the answer is that attention deficit disorder is a neurobiological disorder and is therefore under the classification of other health impairment. So all the children who have attention deficit disorder who are receiving special education services may have other health impairment as their classification. And one other interesting thing to note here too is that autism, which was never a part of the Big Five, now is a part of the Big Five, and as you may be aware, the prevalence of autism continues to rise each year. If we look at the other 17%, you'll see that emotional disturbance makes up 6%, developmental delay makes up 6%, multiple disabilities 2%, and hearing impairments, orthopedic impairments, and visual impairments, deaf blindness, and traumatic brain injury make up less than 1% each. So if you look at the total numbers, 83% are the Big Five, and then the other 17% are represented on the slide here. So what are we talking about in terms of prevalence in the overall numbers? Well, today, the number of children served under IDEA represent approximately 13% of all children in school. So 13% of all children in school receive special education. That also tells you that 87% of the population does not receive any form of special education, and this is why it's considered special. Now, when you talk about prevalence, let's talk about gender, okay? Let's talk about males and females in special education. In the general education population, males and females are enrolled in equal proportion. So in general ed, you have about a 50-50 break of males and females. But in special education, that is not the case. What we know is that there are about twice as many males as females receiving special education. And you may ask, why is that the case? Well, there are a number of different reasons or theories as to why, but the most prominent theory is that boys are more likely to exhibit what we call externalizing behaviors, while girls are more likely to exhibit internalizing behaviors. So what's the difference? Well, boys, we said, are more prone to exhibit externalizing behaviors. And externalizing behaviors are directed outward. They're typically towards other people. Externalizing behaviors are disturbing to others and generally result in considerable disruption in the classroom. So, for example, externalizing behaviors would include being physically aggressive towards people, whether that's punching another child, swinging at another kid, or hitting another child. Throwing a temper tantrum is outward. It's out there towards the classroom in a sense. Screaming at someone, cursing at a teacher, being destructive or being violent, and other types of non-compliant behaviors are considered externalizing behaviors. And so not only are they outward, but they are disturbing to others, which create issues within the classroom. So when you have students that exhibit externalizing behaviors, the teachers are going to say, we need to do something about this child. This child is being disruptive. And often that teacher will go speak to the school psychologist or someone on the committee on special ed to say, this child may need to be evaluated for possible special education and related services because he is being disruptive to the classroom. Now on the other end, internalizing behaviors are directed inward or within the self. Children and youth with internalizing behaviors are far less likely to be identified by teachers and families because they don't create chaos that characterizes children and youth with externalizing behaviors. So for example, internalizing behaviors would be being worried all the time, or shyness, or depression, apathy, anxiety, social withdrawal, or low self-esteem. Think about all of those things. Worrying, being depressed, low self-esteem. Those are just as serious as externalizing types of behaviors, but they don't create problems within the classroom. They don't create chaos within the classroom. And therefore, these children may be model students within the class. They're not creating any trouble within the class. So you as a teacher may look and go, there's no reason to make a referral for this particular kid because there's no chaos being created. So it's very important to understand that internalizing behaviors can be just as serious as externalizing behaviors because of the long-term potential impact. Think of depression, anxiety disorders, or even suicidal thoughts. Obviously, that's extremely serious, but depression, anxiety, those types of feelings and emotions don't create chaos within the classroom. So what's the bottom line in all of this? Since research suggests that girls are more likely to exhibit internalizing behaviors, they are not likely to be disruptive to the class or to the learning process. And therefore, we may not see the behaviors of these students as serious concerns and hence not refer them for an evaluation for possible special education. So again, the bottom line is that boys are twice as likely to be in special education than girls. That's what the numbers indicate. However, many theories as to why occur, but the most prominent theories is that boys are more likely to exhibit outward type behaviors which are disruptive to the class, which we call externalizing behaviors, while girls are more prone to exhibit internalizing behaviors which don't create the chaos, and therefore they are not as referred as often, even though those behaviors are just as serious as externalizing behaviors. This ends the lecture, or the part 3 of the lecture on prevalence. We'll move on now to part 4.